Okay, good evening, everybody. This is the Master Plan Implementation Committee meeting for April 14th, 2021, and I'm calling the meeting to order at 7:05 p.m. And we have all of our members here except for Brittany Taylor right now, and she may be just joining us late. So we will go ahead with the meeting and do what we can do that does not require a vote, because technically without Brittany, we are short of a quorum. I will just see there doesn't seem to be anybody hanging out there as public members for open time for the public. We will skip over the meeting minutes since that would require a vote. So the main two agenda items for tonight really are to go over this one bylaw. So I think I'll do that first, and then we'll jump into the report that Ken sent around. Okay, so I think we can manage both of this. If I can manage to share my screen halfway intelligently, that will be another story, but we'll see. There we go. Okay, something worked for the first time. Wow. Okay. So I know some of you have seen this on your other boards and committees, I'm sure, but this comes out of the bylaws committee. Both Francine and I are part of that. And this is a new bylaw that the committee is proposing. It's only in bold just to make it more visible. It's not bolded for any other reason. But there's basically a new article, a new bylaw article that we were proposing for elected and appointed committees and boards and commissions, etc., on conducting business, and then another one on, or added to it, on membership. So I don't know if people had a chance to look at this at all, or you've seen it in your other committee meetings. If there was anything that strikes you, we wanted it to go out to all the different committees and commissions and hopefully get some response to see any reaction to it, that if we needed to change things, we could. But this is a proposed new bylaw. It doesn't exist. And it just struck us, as there was so much changeover in various committees in town, that we shouldn't take it for granted that everybody knows how to run their committee meeting, and or what some of the duties are, or related to open meeting law, etc. They get told that, but this is one place where everybody can kind of find it in one spot. So how would you like to proceed? Did everybody have a chance to kind of look at this and have any thoughts about it? Or I'd rather not necessarily read every paragraph if we don't have to, but we could just jump to a paragraph if you had questions about it.
I have a question. Based on the fact this has gone out to other boards and committees, have there been suggested changes, comments, etc.? And the second part of that question is it important that it be consistent? In other words, if one board or committee wanted to alter some portion of it in a very, a general portion, not specific to their own committee, but just in general, is that okay, or are you trying for consistency? So those are my questions.
Yeah, well, it would be a bylaw that would apply to everybody, basically. So we're trying not to make this, so specific to a particular committee. And Francine, you're going to need to remind me, there's been just a couple of comments. Most committees did not. We've heard back from probably five or six, maybe different committees or boards.
Yep.
And most had no suggested changes or comments. And I think Ag Commission had one or two small questions or changes. Francine, do you remember what they were again?
Actually, I do, if you want to go through them.
Yeah.
Looking at section 5, when we're talking about posting the meeting time, the agenda, and the minutes, you know that some committees do not post any minutes. However, they turn in written minutes to the town clerk. So they're on record, but not but for people who want to see them, you have to go to Lucy and she will send them to you. But that's an extra step for her when the mechanism is right there to post it, and who's interested can see it. So I think we're going to reword that so that it's clear that that's the expectation.
Okay.
Yeah,
I think what ag was, I think it was the Ag Commission that was
Yes.
suggesting that we get rid of the last part of that, saying that they didn't believe it was required by open meeting law
Open
to
meeting
post,
law, right.
to post the minutes. And it's like, well, you have to take minutes per the open meeting law. And if they were objecting to them being posted online versus being given in hard copy to the
Right.
town clerk, you know, that's a bit of a nuance, but I think that we ought to make, the expectation ought to be consistent. I
Yes,
mean,
and and the other thing is the time frame. They can't go beyond three
Three meetings.
consecutive meetings.
right.
So
So
if
by
you
the,
need every,
Yep.
the minutes have to be posted by the fourth meeting after that particular meeting occurred.
right. So we were gonna try to clarify that. So that's the one of the main comments that we'd heard was, you know, most everybody, as far as I know, people are taking minutes, but some are definitely not posting minutes. You can look in various boards on mytown.gov and you don't find any minutes whatsoever, and you have to ask Lucy, which is kind of, you know, a bit ridiculous in this day and age. There's no reason that they should not be posted, I think, but I
Right.
don't know if anybody else has any comments to the contrary, because we were kind of leaning to making that clearer that the expectation is to have them posted online.
Well, yeah, and the only other way we might change it if there's a real hesitancy to doing that, instead of, take Lucy out of the equation and say, then whoever wants will come to the chair or the clerk of that particular
Yes.
committee.
Yeah, well,
And,
that's good.
let them deal with it, because it makes no sense.
Yeah. So that was probably the one comment on this page anyway.
So I have,
Yeah.
go ahead, Christina, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to ask, does a hard copy also have to be submitted to Lucy? Or is just the posting online sufficient?
Just the posting online, my understanding, because then she copies them off and keeps a hard copy.
Yeah.
All right.
Is my understanding.
That's what she said today, yes.
Yep. So that's the way it goes. Yep. Cindy.
So I have a couple thoughts. One is in regards to the minutes. Is it a case of minutes which are just plain written down by the clerk or somebody in the clerk's behalf if the clerk isn't available for each particular committee? Or do those minutes have to do what we do in our meetings, which is provide a draft of the minutes and be voted on? And should that be pointed out in here? And I
Yes.
say that because I'm afraid the planning board is not doing that very well. And I was concerned about that. It used to be that we reviewed minutes, but kind of got behind. And I don't know about other towns and committees, but
Yep.
I thought they got posted, but yet they were not in
Yes.
fact approved. So that's
No,
one
very-
question. So then
very
go ahead and answer
Good
that
point.
one.
Yeah,
Right.
no, very, very good point. I mean, my understanding is that the minutes are a draft until they are approved at the next meeting
Right.
that is held, and it is after the approval of the minutes that they then
It
get
can be
posted.
So
But we-
what I did there is in that top line, the meeting time agenda and approved minutes
Oh, good. Okay.
for each meeting. Okay,
Yeah.
that takes that into account.
But we might need to specify, yeah, okay. Yeah, just to be clear that, yeah, no, what gets posted are the approved ones, exactly, yeah. So, yeah, we can finesse that a little more if we needed to, but that's a very good point, Cindy, thank you, yeah.
And then another comment going up to that open paragraph above section 3 there. And the last, sentence before last, it says the group is responsible for making every attempt to recruit applicants to fill vacancies. Well, there's another part to that process. It's not just recruiting applicants. During a period between elections, if there's a vacancy and in fact another individual is recruited, that person has to be appointed by the select board. Isn't that correct for the interim period?
Yes.
Yes, it is, yes.
Should that somehow be stated in there? Because it's a little vague. If they just say,
Mhm.
I got a buddy that wants to be here and they
Yep.
show up, that's recruitment, but that's not appointment.
Very good. Yeah.
It does, I think it does address that in the
Farther
next
Yep.
article.
Oh, I'm sorry. Oops. Okay.
I think in the next article,
Well, let's come back, let's
Yeah,
come back.
to section 3 of the next article, not the one we're talking about now, but
Okay.
it is
We'll-
specified.
Let's
Okay.
get to that, but that's a good thing to remember on that. Very good. The quorum thing, Cindy, is here in section 6. That was what we just talked about. So the majority of the number of total members of the group as constituted, which is why, like right now with master plan, we're technically a group of 10. So unless we have our 6th person, we don't have a quorum. Let's see, leave of absence for no longer than 2 months. And this was put in too, because I think there have been committees where people just don't tend to come. They're appointed to a committee and their presence is kind of scattershot. So this is to try and enforce what the
Chris,
expectations are. Yeah, Jim, yes.
point of clarification, when it says as constituted,
Mhm. Yep,
could
that's kind
that
of
be
like,
interpreted as, present members, active members? What does as constituted mean?
as the committee is defined by its charge and its membership is laid out.
As
So-
opposed to constituted doesn't mean, present active members.
No,
No.
it's actually
Okay.
supposed to be a committee of 10. We happen to have 4 vacancies, which
Okay,
are all the at-large members, which at some point we talked about needing to appoint some or get some new membership, but not knowing exactly where we were going with the committee, we decided to hold off on that a little bit, but that is something we need to keep in mind. No, that, and I think we've had legal weigh in on this too, if I'm not mistaken, because a question came up somewhere on somebody else's committee about, well, what about just the members? And it's got to be
okay,
even the vacant seats. Yeah.
because that I can see that can be a real barrier, given the,
Hmm.
it's hard enough to get people to run, to keep, you have committees that you have vacancies, you
Right.
could really cripple any progress.
Hmm. Yeah.
But if that's the legal interpretation, that's constituted means as defined or is laid out in a charter or something, then that
Yeah.
is what it is.
That's my understanding. Francine, is that
Yeah,
yours?
as each committee is designed, the number of members is, stated at that point, and then that becomes a driving force. Some committees only have 3, some have 5, some have 6. I think this is probably the largest with 10,
Yeah.
but yeah, each group, it's not a one size fits all.
Does the select board determine how many persons are on each committee?
When they were originated, I believe that's when it started. Since I've been on, I don't know, Chris, maybe otherwise, I don't believe we've changed anything in terms of numbers,
For
other
master,
than when we had new groups develop.
yeah, no, we haven't. And so like with the new groups that have developed, we've set some membership maximums, I guess I would say, for like the tech committee or the grant committee, the new committees that have formed. So it's been more just determining the maximums, and those don't require necessarily, those committees don't require representation from other committees. So it's basically all appointed members in that regard. So the
And that makes sense there, because we're looking for people with very specific skills. We're just
Right.
not looking for volunteers,
right,
to occupy a seat, especially in IT and in grant writing, those 2 in particular.
right, yeah. So, okay, so just jumping down, the one thing I think, this was one question, maybe in section 8, was it? Members of all groups must provide up-to-date contact information to the town clerk and town administrator. And the question was here whether each member, so all 10 of us, for example, would email Lucy directly, or rather the chair of each committee would gather that information and send one roster, if you will, to Lucy.
Right.
Which, thoughts on that?
Well,
Yeah.
first of all, if you go back up to the top, you don't have to do that, but one of the responsibilities of the committee is to elect or determine a chair, a vice chair, and a clerk really
Right.
early on.
Yes.
So, and then to provide that information to the clerk. To me, that's the ideal time for collecting all the contact information of all the committee members, and in one document, providing all that to the clerk.
Mhm.
And that's important because of some experiences I've had, important just because the clerk needs to know, I mean, the town clerk. But the second thing is, someone should be updating our town website with the right information. You know, Chris, you've run into that where you don't even know where these people are, and
Right.
they're very dated, and I've run into the same thing. So
Right.
I think that's the ideal time, and make, kind of remind the clerk, could you please update the website, or ask somebody else to do it. I don't know who does it these days.
Yeah.
Update the website.
So,
Yep.
so your recommendation is to kind of reword this and move it to section 2.
Yeah,
Okay.
Section 8
That makes sense.
could kind of be combined in a little bit with section 2 there. Yeah.
yep.
Yeah, it
Yep.
makes sense there.
Yep.
Okay, that's fine. Yep. And I think back on the, sorry, the one that we were just talking about, the responsibility to recruit new members, wherever that was a minute ago. I think the idea is that it would be up to the committee to try and say, hey, we've got some openings out there, and try to gin up some interest for people to join that committee. I don't know if everybody agrees with that idea, but yes, they would have to be people that I would think the committee would want to vet in a way in terms of their interest level or qualifications to join that committee before they recommended that they fill out the volunteer form and send it in to select board to be appointed. I mean, I don't know what anybody feels about that. Is it
There's probably a word that's not vet.
yeah.
That's to say recruit, and I can't think of the word right now. There must be a verb that we want to have that same meaning, which is what you're saying, to make sure they're the appropriate person for the committee.
Now, identify and recruit qualified candidates.
That's not bad. That's
You know,
good.
qualified and interested candidates or something like that.
Yeah.
I mean, I think
Yep.
the interest level and commitment has got to be there somehow.
But what I wonder, and this is in regard to the Historical Commission, as a group, we know only a certain number of people who we think might be interested, but from time to time, applications have come in from people we don't know. I think through the select board, maybe. I can't quite remember, but it would be good, I think, to have openings more widely known so that where people can read them
Yeah.
and perhaps step up, and they might be people that we as a group don't know.
Right. No, that's true. And I think the idea here, especially, we haven't figured out a way to do this, but it has been talked about a little bit, is people don't know in many cases what the various committees or commissions do, right? So unless they do take the time to go to the website and look at everything, some of them have a paragraph that really pretty much explains what their function is, but others don't. So there needs to be maybe kind of a general place where you could just kind of run down the list of, okay, here's all the committees and here's their one paragraph synopsis of their main reason for being, kind of thing. So people could get a sense of anything they might be interested in, especially new people to town, but not necessarily just that. But
Mhm.
then I would think, I guess I would hope that select board isn't the one sort of promoting or appointing candidates for the committees without certainly spending time talking to the committee members themselves. I mean, to me, I would rather see the new people come up through the committee to the select board rather than the other way around, but I'm not sure how it's been done in the past.
No, and that is fine. I'm just wondering how townspeople learn that there are vacancies.
Yeah, well, some of it's in Robert's newsletter and other social media. I know it gets out, but it's not really that well known in many cases whenever there are vacancies. So we need to,
If there were a place on the town website, I mean, for instance, if there were a description of each of the committees as you just outlined,
yeah,
I wonder if that could be updated from time to time to indicate whether there are vacancies, or if
Yeah.
there is a vacancy to make note of it in that description.
Yeah.
I'm not sure, but it would be, I know that it would be nice to get some new, fresh thinking on the historical commission,
Mhm.
and we need to know new people.
yeah, sure. Yep. No, that's a good point. And I think we can do that. And it may, some of that may be there that, when there is a committee vacancy, but I bet you it's so buried on that individual page that nobody could find it unless they knew to look for it. So part of it is it's got to be something brought forward more on the homepage that people could look at as a news announcement or something like that on the homepage.
I wonder if Robert would just list vacancies. Might he do that as a way of getting it out, or
Yeah.
the Facebook page or something?
He does it in his newsletter from time to time, so that would be one thing. I'm sure he would do that. Yeah, yeah. And I think Tammy keeps updating some of the things up. She shares news on the community Facebook page, and that happens too. But I think it does need to be on the town website. Just like when we've got a job opening, for a town employee, I think there is a section there for openings, but it's not something that would attract anybody's attention unless you were really looking for it. So the whole website needs some work, obviously. One of these other parts of our challenge, but yes. So I think we could make that more known, Christina. I think we need to. So, okay, good. What else?
Well, so we took care of section 8 in
Yep.
making it the responsibility of the chair to gather the information.
Mm-hmm.
Then there was one of the committees who responded raised a question about communications with any board or committee and the response time. In section 10, it is the responsibility of the chair and his designee to respond to a resident inquiries by mail, email, or phone within 10 business days of receipt. And what we really mean to say is that we would like the chair or her designee to acknowledge receipt of the inquiry and to, inform the person that correspondence will be brought up at the next meeting of the committee, at which time they can expect a response.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
Because the committee may not meet for 30 days or something,
Right.
right? And so
Right.
that needs to be clarified, that they wouldn't get the full response, but they would at least get the courtesy of an acknowledgement that their email had been received, and
Yes.
they would get a more complete response after the committee meets, whenever it next meets. Does that make some sense to people?
Yes, that's important, I think.
Because I think if you wait until the committee meets and it's 30 days, people they feel ignored, overlooked.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think
exactly.
this gets to that.
And,
Right.
and the second part of what you said, Francine, is really critical. The chair may not be the right person to be the respondent, to be telling the response. It might be something that we don't want the chair to be doing it. It needs to be a committee decision. And
Mhm.
that's, like that, I know in the past has been a problem. Certain chair people have given responses to townspeople without even talking about it to their committee. And
Yes, and that has to be emphasized, and I think that is in the other article where we're talking about
Yep.
participation on a committee.
Yep.
Mhm.
So we'll
Yeah.
get to that in a minute, but yeah, okay. So then number 11 is just groups that are not statutorily created or in the bylaws already. If it's a new committee, then those must be approved by the select board. So that was the case, for example, with the new grant committee, with the new tech committee. Those are ad hoc, both are ad hoc committees now, but they had to come into existence through the select board's voting and desire to have them exist, basically. So I think that's true. Disclosure of conflict of interest, filing that if there is a conflict of interest with the town clerk. All that seems pretty self-explanatory, I think. The other issue we've had is either people don't resign in writing, they just stop coming to meetings. Or if they do resign, I don't know, the loop is not always closed, I guess, with the town clerk to know that somebody's resigned. So this is trying to tighten that up a little bit, to say that you do have to put in your resignation in writing to the town clerk.
Because they can't appoint the replacement until there's a verifiable vacancy.
Right. So, okay. So if there's no other questions on this section, I'll just jump down. The next part of this is just tied in.
Oh, could I just ask one thing? I'm thinking again about making vacancies known at the time of a written resignation. Might that be and that goes to Lucy, might she then post it somewhere, like on the town site, that there is a vacancy?
Yeah, I mean, yes, somewhere that would be the logical time to post it, is when she receives and records a resignation, to know
Right.
that there is an opening. I mean, the first knowledge would be the committee itself, obviously, but then yes, to make it posted and known. And part of the issue is right now, you know, we just have a temporary person on standby, not on standby, but on retainer. The same person who does the library website updates. So we don't have, Art Lawrence used to keep our website going. He's no longer doing that. So we've got a person who's on, you know, on call a couple of times a month to update something. If we need something urgent put up about the election or about COVID or whatever, you know, Ed calls her and she puts up whatever he wants her to put up. But that's just kind of keeping up with noticing,
Right.
you know, immediate notices, which this could be too. The vacancy would fall into that category. But other, you know, design changes of the website to make it easier to read and find things is not yet being done.
Can I ask a quick question there? Is that something that there's funding for to redo the website? That you know
Well,
of?
hopefully, maybe. It's going to be, it's part of a charge. I think in the ad hoc tech committee, they've kind of divided up the people by their skills and expertise and interest level. And there is a mini committee, a subcommittee of 2 or 3 people that are going to probably be trying to take on the idea of the website and figure out how to tackle it, looking at other towns' websites and see what looks better than ours, maybe, and then figuring out what it might take to do some web hosting and updating it, and what that might cost. So there's some preliminary studying and analysis that will happen first to know what that's really going to mean. But yeah.
Okay, because I say that because the woman who was our graphic design volunteer, who did the whole mailer for the open space committee
Right.
programs that y'all got, that colorful one.
Yeah.
She has a person that works for her who's a website designer.
Okay.
She was sitting on my back porch here the other day, and she said that person has great talent. However, it is not pro bono. So
Yeah.
I didn't know.
Okay. Good
so
to
just
know.
keep it in mind. Sorry.
Hey,
Yeah.
Chris?
Yep.
For section 12 there,
Okay.
it doesn't really say the specifics. You know, is there a particular form to use? Like it says, must file a conflict of interest disclosure with the town clerk. Is it just you're sending an email? You're sending a.
I think there is
There is a form,
Yep.
Okay.
There
and
is a
it comes
form.
from the state.
Yeah.
Yes.
We might cite the name or the numbering of that form,
I
Francine.
think that
I
makes
know.
sense, right?
Yeah, that's a good point, Jim. I know Randall fills one out constantly when his wife is doing, you know, property or building closures or whatever, housing closures, because Randall's got a potential conflict of interest with, you know, whatever, the highway department in relation to that
The
new
road
house or whatever.
maintenance and all that.
Yeah, so good
Right.
point. Yeah, no, we can
So
definitely
if it's
cite-
a state form, this section 12 implies that it first goes to the committee that you're on, and along with the select board and the town clerk. And then it says, based on circumstances, further consultation with the state. But that doesn't clarify whether you're sending it to all, including the state first, and then it's consultation with the state, or it's a lot of this is reading too vague to me. It's
Okay.
not clear.
Okay.
I have one somewhere because I just filed one. And I did call the Ethics Commission, gave the specifics, got their opinion that it was not in fact conflict of interest. And at that point, she instructed me to fill out the form. Once I talked to her and got some resolution, and then I submitted it to Lucy. I'll see if I can dig it up here.
So you actually consulted with the state first and then filed the form.
Right.
Yeah.
And is
So
that
maybe-
the procedure?
So maybe that's just out of order the way we have it here.
Well, I don't know if there is a procedure, but let me look at through my papers here. I mean, they may say to you at the state level, disclosure is not necessary because this really does not represent the conflict of interest. So that was why I went there first.
Right.
But
I suppose you'd want something like that in writing anyway, just an email confirmation, because,
right,
right. You
and
would.
I've had that too.
yeah.
Yeah, no, you would want that in writing.
Could you just take the word further out? Because that further implies afterwards. And I
Okay.
think that's what I'm hearing from Jim. Maybe if it just said, based on the specific circumstances of the conflict of interest, comma, consultation might be necessary.
Mhm, mhm.
And
Okay,
not-
I have the form here, so I can, let's see if we can paraphrase from that.
Mhm.
Okay.
Okay.
Uh,
And
But I
it,
have the guidelines, yes.
okay, and it may
Might it
be,
be, oh, I'm sorry.
go ahead, Christina.
I was just wondering if you were to insert the word form after conflict of interest disclosure form with the
Mhm.
town clerk, that would at least let them know that there is a form that has to be filled
Right.
out.
And we
Right.
have the number and everything. I can do that.
Yeah,
That's good. That's a good,
Right.
yeah,
The Mass State Conflict of Interest Disclosure Form,
Form.
number, blah, 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 blah.
number, whatever, right, yeah. And then maybe the if there is a conflict of interest, it must be on file with the town clerk.
yeah.
That's true, but if it's got to do with any business that select board would be involved in, it would come to select board. I don't know if all of them would come to select board, but I guess probably they would at some point, just so we're aware. I don't know. I've only seen one or two people that are in a key position for that to happen, so we'll take a look at it. This probably just needs to be tightened up a little bit in terms of
Right.
clarity. So thanks, Jim. Yep, good points.
Yeah, I like the idea of Francine's idea of whatever the form instructions are, you paraphrase them and put them on there.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay, very good. Okay, all right, hopping down real quick down to the membership participation. So maximum number of members and alternates, if appropriate, specified at the time the group is created, and the maximum shall be an odd number. Should an existing group, which was originally set up with an even number of members, consistently not be able to conduct necessary business due to tie votes, the group may petition the select board, or the select board may decide to increase the membership of the group by one. I don't know if anybody falls into that, but that allows that. So,
Bylaws committee falls into that.
yeah, actually, yeah. Okay, you're right. We do. Yep. So that's what's related there. So groups may request to join an appointed group by submitting an application to the group or the select board directly. But here what we had tried to say was forms received by the select board shall be forwarded to the members of the group. Again, it seems to me that, the group has got to be the one kind of putting applicants forward for select board's consideration.
And I'm just gonna add to here, the members of the group to which the individual has applied.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Yep.
I don't want them confusing the group with the select board,
Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah, right. Group shall submit the recommendation along with the application. Well, see, the applications considered oftentimes get sent directly back to Ed, though. When people fill it out, it's on the town website and they turn it around and send it right back into Ed. So usually the group would know that somebody's applying to be one of their members, I would think. I mean, you guys, Jim, you've had new members recently. You guys had a clue about who was joining you or who was thinking about putting their name in, right, before it got to select board?
I wish it were that clean. We're not, we've got a very good new couple of members, one of which unfortunately had to leave the group just recently, but
Oh,
expressed an interest and I met with them at our mutual suggestion, and so kind of vetted it out a little that way. And our more recent appointee was recommended by a member,
mm-hmm.
and she's been great. But I mean, not beyond that, not a lot of vetting. And frankly, there's openings across boards all across town, so you
Yeah.
want to vet and see that they're have interest and have some staying power.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes you're happy to have a body.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and one of the things that I know that have happened in other committees, not that I've connected with here in town, but that you would, if you had interest in a particular committee, you would attend at least one of those meetings, maybe two, to sort of, get a sense of what that committee or board or commission was all about, and let it be known that you were interested in possibly joining, and the kinds of skills that you thought or whatever you thought you could contribute to that committee.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of another way. We didn't write that in here, but that is another way to sort of do the vetting, is that people sort of observe and just, they're just there at the meeting to understand more about what happens in that committee.
I really like that idea. We don't want to make this too big of a document, but it could be a one-sentence suggestion.
Yeah.
Suggested that people attend one or two meetings. I like it.
Mm-hmm. Because then, the group shall submit its recommendation along with the applications. Maybe that's a little too heavy duty. I don't know. It might be. Because I mean, yeah, I don't know. That might be a little too prescriptive, is what I'm wondering. I mean, but I do want the group to feel like they've got a say in who's joining the group. So I don't know whether.
Well, ultimately, anyone who joins would have to be voted in, right? The voter has the ultimate say.
No, I mean, no, these would be appointed by the select board. Or, well, there could be some that are elected, but I mean, the ones that are, asking to join would be volunteering, would be appointed by the select board.
Right, but aren't they appointed for only so long until there's an election, or could they be appointed for a whole full term?
Many committees are just appointed committees.
No,
Yeah,
well, wait a
and-
Then
second.
there should be some kind of vetting.
Yeah.
No, in answer to Jim's question, if someone leaves in the middle of their term, say it's a 3-year term, and they leave after 1 year, and then there's an appointment, doesn't the appointment fill the complete term, which is no?
No, it goes to the next, if it was an elected position, it goes until the next election. If
Oh,
it
okay.
was an appointed position, it could go to the end of the term. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yes, I do now, yes.
So, yeah, so if somebody was just on an appointed position and resigned, yes, you can fill that appointment, and that person would, just serve out that person's term. Yeah. So
Boy,
we didn't specify any of that in here. I don't know if we need to, but
yeah, I don't think we need to.
yeah. But we, we got further down here, and maybe this is, too far into the weeds of this notion of vetting or recommending or whatever. But number 4, if the applicant feels that their application hasn't been fully evaluated by the group within a reasonable time or whatever, they can ask the select board to review it. I mean, that, I don't know if I really like that as much as as I thought I did.
It was to review the status of the application.
Yeah, maybe that's it. It's just more the, if it hasn't been acted on for a month, then yeah, the status is one thing, but not so much.
Well,
Well,
I
the next step-
interpreted 4 as kind of an anti-cronyism
Mhm.
option, so you have especially if you have a group that's selected,
Mhm.
not elected,
Yeah.
and they suddenly get very, closed, and someone wants to join who has some good ideas and input, but it's not necessarily fitting the current group.
Mhm.
That
Yeah.
person shouldn't be shut out necessarily,
Okay.
especially if there's an opening.
Yeah.
And so the select board could act as a means to mitigate that. That's how I
Okay.
interpreted number 4.
Okay. That's
Well, if you look at the very next sentence after that, it says, based on its review, the select board may appoint the applicant despite the lack of recommendation from the group in question.
yeah.
Right, exactly.
And only in unusual circumstances. So. Okay. Well, if that seems to be doable, I mean, I do tend to agree there with Jim, what you said there in terms of this notion of not having, too many of a same particular group or clique or whatever it might be that might be more problematic than they are helpful. I mean, that would give a little bit of emphasis there. I just wasn't sure about just this whole notion of vetting and recommending by the group to be, the seat to be filled there, that group. I guess I was just getting a little confused on that, but yeah, whatever anybody else thinks. Anybody else? Cindy, Christina, you have any thoughts on that part?
I agree that section 4, I think there's too much detail here. I think you need to slim, carve it down a bit and try not to consider every single contingency. And I wonder if some of these ways that you wrote this came from specific issues that people said, oh, this is constantly a problem. Or if, and if it's not a problem, I think you got a lot in here, and that's my general thinking. I haven't thought about how to shave it down, but that's my thought.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll take that under consideration and,
Yeah.
and come back to the bylaws committee and see what we can do there. There might be a little bit more preciseness that can happen there. All right.
I know from the historical commission that we've had people write letters of it that expressing interest, and I don't think they've gone beyond the chair. And we haven't gotten any new members, and so I like the idea that if someone really wants to be on a board and the group does not does not take action on it, that they can go to the select board to review it.
I mean, it seems like there does need to be some level of an appeal. It's almost like an appeal process, right? To to, have another opening if that's, not seen any action or not seen the light of day. So that was the intent. But again, I think we can go back and just be careful, more careful in our wording here, perhaps a little bit, and really get at the nugget of what we're trying to say and not too wordy. All right. Okay, and then number 5, people whose terms expire wish to be reappointed. The group shall consider these applications along with those of any new applicants, and make those known to the select board as well. If there are no new applicants, select board may choose to reappoint those whose terms expire. So I don't think we've ever really been in a position that I can think of where we've had existing members competing with new members for the same seat. I don't think we've been so lucky.
Yeah, we actually have.
Oh, really? Oh, okay. Where? Really?
It has happened, and the decision was not to continue with the existing board member. It was to replace with new.
Okay.
And that was a decision of the select board. And I wasn't on the select board at the time. It was before my time, but I was at that meeting, and I
okay.
remember that. It happened to 2 people.
Oh, well, okay. Well, I would have not thought that. Okay. Well, I guess it's your...
I was going to ask if there's ever been any discussion about term limits.
That's probably an idea. I mean, the unfortunate part is, we don't have enough people.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I hear you. I think that that's probably a good thing to think about.
For 2 or 3 terms or something like that.
Well, yes,
So,
and historical commission is a very good example. Shoot, I've been on it for like 15 years, and I've suggested numerous times that it might be nice to have someone with fresh
Yeah.
ideas, some fresh blood on the commission, and I'm encouraged to stay on, but the whole committee is like that.
Yeah.
We're just ancient. It's an ancient committee, and I think it could use some new people, including someone to replace me.
Then you live up to the name of the group, historical.
Yeah. Needs restoration, Francie.
There we go.
But then one committee I can think of is the CPC, and Virginia, thank goodness for her sharp mind, because she's just a wealth of memory and knowledge and experience. And I don't know what her long-term plans are, but there's an example of someone who's been on for a very long time, I believe since the beginning, since the inception of it. And she's, in my opinion, quite valuable for that,
Well, that can be, yes, that can be said of a great many people, but so there are advantages and disadvantages to people sitting on the same committee and in the chair position for term after term.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it was just a question as to whether limits had ever been considered. I think in some cases it would be good to stir up committees a little bit.
Do we want to put anything in about how often then each committee should hold an election for officers? Is that in here anywhere? I'm trying to remember if we ever said that or not. Is it annually?
Yes. You mean about appoint? Yes, it says right, not in this one, but I think in the first article.
In the other one, it did.
I think it was supposed to be annually to
Well,
elect.
it said appointed committees at the fiscal year, and then elected right after the elections took place.
Yeah.
And
So
I think it bears repeating though in this document as well, because there of the committees that I'm on, not many have done that. Not all of them have done that.
Yeah. Yeah. And it might be, I wonder if it might be in terms of the term appointment or the term limit, Christina, I'm wondering if it would make sense rather than saying how many terms you could serve, but how many times you could be serving as the chair, for example. I don't know.
Well,
if that-
isn't the chair supposed to change every year? And there's a problem with willingness and time.
Yeah, well,
For
that's just
that
it.
as well. But then to
mean-
Cindy's point, Virginia is invaluable as the
Right.
chair
Right.
on CPC. So I'm not quite sure
Yeah, okay,
what the best solution is for that.
yeah. Yeah, okay. All right, well, something we can add to our notes, Francine, to consider and
Yeah.
see whether we can take a look maybe at some other bylaws in other towns if they exist and see if there's anything clearer there. I don't know. They may not even exist in other places, but so then just briefly, the last few things in terms of the select board will evaluate the applicant's qualifications, give weight to the group's recommendation. If the select board, or once the select board does appoint, the town administrator's office sends a note to the individual and to the town clerk, and the individuals must go accept the appointment and be sworn in by the town clerk. And then this one, if a member is absent for more than half the group's regularly scheduled meetings for over a 6-month period, or does not participate in the group's work for over a 6-month period, said member may be removed from the group by majority vote. And they could appeal that to the select board if they so choose. And the select board may vote to remove some or all for cause. And so that could be something obviously more egregious that would have occurred. Any final thoughts before we jump off of this? These
So
are
Chris,
all
I'm just
helpful.
curious about C.
Yep.
What if the opposite takes place where, you know, either citizens or members of the select board notice that somebody is constantly absent, but the group isn't saying anything about it, is not taking any action? You know, can the select board say, look, you know, we're removing this person from the group because they're not doing anything. We need to open it up for someone else to be on the board.
Mm-hmm.
I know that's an unusual way to think about it, but
Mm-hmm.
and I don't anticipate this happening, Tom, but members of a group could control the votes on the group by limiting differing opinions by letting something like that slide, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah, that's a valid point.
I know I'm always thinking in these very negative ways, but
No. Trying to think of all the other possibilities.
But there are instances, Jim, where this is happening and the leadership of the committee may not be, you know, pursuing
exactly,
a reasonable conclusion here.
right.
Yeah.
I hear you.
Yeah, and I don't know, I mean, obviously, many of us are on select board, are liaisons to various committees, but there aren't enough of us to go around to go to every committee. We're not, you know, every committee does not have a liaison from select board. So in some cases, by being the liaison, you would probably be more aware of that situation, right? And you could report it back or counsel, if you will, the committees saying, hey, guys, you know, what's happening with this person? We haven't seen him in, you know, 3 months or whatever. But otherwise, in the absence of there being a select board liaison, it's a little hard to know what happens at some of these other committees. Okay, well, let's not further debate it, but it's a valid point, Jim. Let us sort of take it back and hash it around a little bit at bylaws and see if we can come up with some thoughts about that. I'm not sure totally what some of the limits of the powers of the select board are related to that, because everything is basically volunteer committees for the most part. So it's kind of a tricky one, but we do need to consider that option, that possibility. Cindy, you're muted, Cindy. Sorry.
Before you actually totally close this topic though, and I don't think it's been mentioned there, but I've heard circumstances where some committees don't meet on a regular basis, should be, maybe even they should be meeting quarterly, minimally.
Mhm.
Don't meet. I think, didn't we run into that, in fact, in this committee when we were trying to gather information and we found out, well,
Right.
they haven't met in a year or something.
Yeah,
I
that's true.
don't know if you want to not do it in this group, but at some point consider what would be what would the select board's actions be if it was discovered that a committee just wasn't meeting?
Okay, good point. Good point. Okay. Well, and maybe we should say that, the committee, no matter what your charge is, that all committees should meet at least quarterly or something, or at least twice a year. Something like that, as a minimum,
Yeah,
Whatever you think, yeah.
I think that the minimum is good.
So, okay. All right. Well, thank you for that. That's all very, very good discussion and very good feedback. We really do appreciate that. So let's, if I can find this, let's jump on to the main thing here. And I do want us to be done by 8:30. So I don't want to take too much time here, but I think this is important. And I'm just hoping that everybody's had a chance to look at things. And do I have the right one is the question. Hold on. Because there is, the report that I sent out has the main report and then come on.
Then the appendix.
Appendix. So I just want to be sure I've got the right version of something here. Of course, it won't go down. No, let's do this. Yeah, my cursor stopped. There we go. Which one do I have? Of course, I have the appendix. All right. Well, let me just run through the appendix real quick. So you saw what this was, I think, is just the medium and the long-term goals. So Ken basically, took some scissors to the overall strategies that were part of the master plan and all of our work we did with Mike on the SMARTY goals, etc. And in the document itself is the short-term and accomplished goals. And then he broke out the medium and long-term goals to be part of the appendix of things to still be working on. So this document, the first 10 pages are basically those goals per chapter. And then the last 20 pages is essentially the community survey. So that's all the appendix is. But just to run through this, and Jim, what I found kind of interesting here, I know you guys are going to be working on updating the housing production plan, and I know you've been talking about establishing a housing trust fund. And look at this, you're going to be ahead of the game if you can get this done. It's theoretically a long-term goal. Of course, we're in year 9, year 10 of the master plan now anyway, right?
Right. And I think realistically, getting a lot of help and guidance from the state to that, like the DLTA, but also Mass Housing Partnership makes it feasible. If we were trying to do this on our own.
Exactly. So basically, I don't know that we need to go through the appendix. I'd rather go through the report, but just so that you understand that these are the ones that are in here. There might be one or two here that you think, oops, no, really, this is one that we accomplished. Somehow we missed it, and we've actually done this already. So I guess that would be my thought, is if you see anything in these ones in the appendix that you think we've already accomplished, that needs to move into the main report, we could do that. Okay. There's one that came to my mind. I just want to see if I can find it real quick. I'm forgetting. Let me just run down quick. Okay. Regulations. Oh, I know, it was here. Council on Aging, 6.7. Expand the number of staff by adding a full-time director and increase the number of hours for the part-time assistant. I think we've done that, haven't we, Francine?
Yes.
So I don't know why this ended up still being in the medium term, for example, midterm.
We haven't increased the assistance time.
We haven't. Okay.
No, and the fact that full-time in our town is 4 days a week.
Okay.
Even despite the fact that people need services like transportation and other things 5 days a week. We just
Okay.
don't have anyone there.
Okay, so maybe it's not fully
Yeah,
implemented.
I would leave that.
Okay, that's fine. Okay, that was the only one that just jumped out at me real quick here, but okay, so I'm gonna pop out of that and get into the real report if I can do that without, hopefully, if I can find the right one. Okay, hang on a minute. Too many things open here. Where to go? I want to close you. Oh, come on now. Just a minute.
I really don't know what we're gonna do when we have to go back to in-person meetings. I mean, we have the benefit here of being able to share documents and so forth, and sometimes we don't, in in-person meetings, we don't always have that opportunity.
Oh, wow, this is way big. Wait a minute. How do I make it smaller? Help. I don't know. Well, I'll see if I can. What happened here? I'm not sure. Oh, there we go. It's only at 150%. That's why. Okay, let me try that. Let's go to 100% and see if that's a little better. Let's see if that gets us somewhere. Okay. So this is the one. Okay. So, well, just a couple words of intro, and then if you've had a chance to go through it and just give some general impressions over what we saw the first time around. Ken did take basically, I think, all of our comments to heart and was not hesitant at all about making changes and incorporating things. We did decide to put in all the members of the committee as they were at one point in time when we were working through the whole SMARTY goals, even though that is not as of January 21, but nonetheless, well, in a couple cases they were actually, in terms of when people resigned. I think they were all technically on as of January 21. Well, no, that's wrong. January 20. Never mind. The date of this report is January 2021. So people resigned before that, but we kept names on there. And then we did change the name of it instead of that crazy implementation, the element report, I think he was calling it. The element, he changed that to implementation. So basically now we have pretty much a 25-page report with some introduction, and then what he's calling this action plan of recommendations divided out by chapter. And at the end of every chapter, he gave basically a little write-up of, here's some ways that you can try and achieve this. Here's some possible resources. So he did try to make it more readable. I think it's definitely easier to digest than the early version that we saw. Yeah. And at the very end, there's a listing of the ones that were accomplished, the strategies that have been accomplished from the original master plan. So with that in mind, does anybody have a particular page or comment they'd like to start with? I don't really want to go paragraph by paragraph. So any overarching comments or thoughts?
From my perspective, I think it's, breaking it up into, the main document and appendices gives people, what is immediate and information. And it's done in a really, I think, a very, very good way. I like at the end, as you're talking about, after the charts, at the end, there's some narrative there. And then even beyond that, there's some direction on how who else you might work with in the state to achieve it, which I think is great direction. It's always, well, who do we ask? Who do we go to? Yeah. And this is very specific. I like that a lot.
Okay. I'll just scroll a little bit here. And this is all just talking a little bit about the survey, and then just a few highlights of the survey, I think. And then we got into listing again the various priorities that came up from the survey. Let's see, and then here we get into the final thing here. So this action plan kind of thing is sort of this summary. And so this is where the short-term strategies are by chapter. Okay, so for housing, these are all the short-term type strategies that were plucked out of the original plan here. And then if we jump down, oops, there we go. Trying to get this so I can move my cursor. So there's a variety of things here still in the short term, which are not classified as having been achieved. They're still on the table to be looked at and considered. But then at the end, I'm just trying to, there we go. So it's not lengthy narrative, but it does give us some guidance about what kind of resources are out there. Obviously, PVPC's zoning model bylaws seem to appear a few times as a reference, but if that's what they do, I guess they can serve their purpose. Yeah, where would anybody like to talk? I mean, do you each want to look at your specific chapter, like housing, historical, open space? What would you like to do? Anybody?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. So looking at the housing ones, again, there were very few. There were those couple that we looked at quickly in the appendix. I think there were only 2 that were on the long term for housing. Most of the housing was in this sort of short term time frame in terms of the way it was allocated at the time of the master plan, I guess. And a lot of it was related to zoning bylaws.
Right. Collaborating with the planning board.
Right, exactly. So a lot of this is there, and that's where I guess you guys are going, right? In terms of working with the PVPC's new grant, you guys and the planning board, housing and planning, are going to be working together on
A housing production plan.
right. That's great.
Yeah.
Now, housing is not identified in many of those. It's just planning board.
Right.
Very good point. We probably should make that more known. Yeah.
Well, I think planning board input is really good, and
No, but I'm just saying
excuse me,
that
I think-
housing input is good as well. I'm just saying, I'm not saying eliminate planning. I'm saying that it seems as though it would be a combined effort.
I think I said the wrong thing. I meant to say, I think housing input is really, really good. However, I think the idea of proposing these kinds of bylaws, at least in the last few years that I've been involved with the planning board, has fallen to the planning board. Now, periodically, over the course of time of the review of bylaws that we've been undergoing, and it preceded my term, and we've been using this consultant, Larry Smith, who's not very well right now. He has some medical issues, but periodically, they've brought in other groups to contribute ideas like
Right.
zoning board of appeals, et cetera. I haven't noted that planning board has brought housing in, but I think the question we're faced with is, do we want to alter this document in order to address whether or not a board or committee other than the planning board is responsible for it? I think that's the question that's before us.
Well, it might be able to be addressed more. It is mentioned here, one.
Right. Right.
And I guess partly because all of this is more zoning related. Yeah, we might be able to address it more in the narrative rather than changing the chart, if that's your point, Cindy, because this is pretty much the charts, that we have been working with from before. And I guess I don't know myself when the original master plan was done of how active the housing authority was back in 2000 whatever 10 or whatever year that was.
Well, I would also say, maybe this is to Cindy's point, that the master plan, at the time we were going through this, this is pre-Ken and everything, back with Mike and George and some other folks. There were actually, the group was constituted very differently. And we really vetted this really well. So I'd be very reticent, frankly, to start changing things that were really, I felt, well thought out.
And
You
and
know,
I think,
it's like some backdoor editing. It feels
yeah, no,
not
that's fine.
fully informed.
Yeah,
I'm just comparing it to the original master plan though. And I'll continue to do that for a minute.
okay. I think, you know, under the ones where we see a lot of the planning, it's a planning board mentioned here. Um, it's really under this goal 1 or 2, the amendments to the bylaw, which is really much
That's
more the
their
planning.
purview.
That is their kind of
Right.
responsibility in that section in goal 1.2. And then as you get down to 1.3, you start to see
Yeah.
housing authority appear. So
Yeah.
publicizing affordable housing resources,
Mhm.
and establishing partnership with other town committees, and then creating affordable housing opportunities in Southampton. A lot of that is falling more now into the
Right.
housing authority's bailiwick here, using CPA funds, checking in with community development block grants, etc.
And Cindy and Christina, you know, you were there with me. You can confirm this or not, but I recollect when we were doing this back when there were, you know, more and different people on the MPIC. And Francine, you too, you know, I remember saying, it's like almost like this mantra, is like, geez, there's a lot of stuff that's falling on the planning board. We all recognized it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
This, it does seem to be consistent with the original master plan.
Okay. I think so. I don't think Ken changed any of this. I think he took the work that we had done with Mike as the last iteration that we had finished up with Mike and the Smarty goals. And that's where he's cut and pasted from.
Mhm.
So, okay. So then the narrative part here, just talking about, you know, achieve some of these goals through zoning bylaw amendments. PVPC can be a resource for certain things. Did talk a little bit here about having this inclusionary zoning bylaw, but it hasn't produced the housing that assists the town in meeting its goals. So there's a little bit of advice and a little bit of here's where you might go to look at something else. So it's not super detailed, but it gets us more than what we had before. I think it doesn't leave us completely, you know, hands up in the air saying, okay, well now what do we do, right? I mean, I do feel better about this structure of the report, I guess.
I would add, Chris, where it says the HPP, the housing production plan, that last paragraph, I don't know, maybe some mention of, you know, goals 1.1 and 1.2, because we're definitely collaborating closely with the planning board on the housing production plan, because so much of the housing production plan is dependent on or dovetails with zoning and et cetera. So this little paragraph kind of implies that it's just going to be for goal 1.4. I don't see it that way.
Okay.
Cindy, you're nodding your head.
I'm reading it now, and can you scroll up again, Chris,
Yep.
to the top of that section? Just
Down further.
you know, keep going down now.
Yeah, sorry, my cursor's jumping.
So I think to sort of an administrative approach to this whole document, I agree with what Jim just said, because it only refers to you know, a few goals, whereas the whole section, it seems to imply cooperation not only with the creation or the proposal for new zoning bylaws, but also with the implementation of all the goals that we want to see achieved. We shouldn't be limiting it in that little tiny paragraph at the end there, that with the housing production plan, the one you can go down a little bit more. I
Well,
wonder if that's, does that,
he's not really talking about who's doing what.
yeah,
Goal 1 or 2 here, that's in the chart, right? So he's just saying those goals are achievable
yeah.
because of certain actions that are taking place or could take place, right?
Mhm.
So he's not really saying that the housing production plan is only going to be done with the housing authority solo. He's just making a statement, the way I'm reading it, that when it's updated, it will really advance progress on goal number 4 there, 1.4.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah,
You're-
that's good. Yeah, I'll go with that.
You're right. I see that.
I
Yeah.
think as I read that, and then same with 1.3, to achieve that, the goal is really to access whatever that one was. 1.3 was awareness of housing needs and available resources. So, yeah, I don't know.
The paragraph that refers to goals 1 through 3 and using CPC funds, I think that's a little bit of a concern because the specific housing CPC funds are for affordable housing. And I don't see that in goal 1 through 3. If you go back up again, are those considered affordable, in the definition of affordable, or just
One of them is 3A.
available housing?
3A. Affordable housing resources
Okay, yeah.
by expanding the housing authority webpage on the town's website. So, yeah,
Yeah, and he's got over there right there where
Yeah.
your cursor is right now.
Right.
I think it's kind of jumping the gun there that, they're saying that that's would pay for the consultant. I don't know. I wonder if that's grant funding. That's where Virginia's vast knowledge is so helpful.
yeah,
They say that can or cannot be done.
right. Well, I know she's got the those administrative funds, but there are certain things that I think undesignated funds. So he did, I'm sorry, yeah. And I don't remember now if, I don't know, okay, now that I mentioned that, this last column, there's status and resources.
Yeah,
This must be stuff maybe that Ken has added, right? This column?
that is definitely what he's added. I noticed that when I read this the first time, when I
Yeah.
read his most recent final edition.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, he added a lot of that, and a lot of it's repetitive. Not saying it's wrong, but I think there's a little concern there. And your point about the administrative funds for CPA, Francine, you were at the meeting last week, and I brought up a question of whether CPA funds could be used for that project that we were talking about, the Barnes Aquifer map, et cetera. And she said, no, that isn't something you use the administrative funds for. So these are things that are subtleties that she knows what can or can't be used for. And I couldn't even begin to tell you. So I think my point is in this.
We should check with her.
Pardon me?
We should check with her before we make any.
We would absolutely want to check with her. And he has phrased it in a gentle way, could or might be used or something. It may be wrong. And I don't know if we can use those funds for consultants. Don't know.
But who paid for the envelope study for the town hall? Wasn't it CPC?
Who paid for it? That was CPC funds, right?
Yeah, so I'm looking at it sort of the same way. You're hiring a third party.
Yeah. Was that on a warrant that got voted on, or was that administrative funds? I don't remember.
Oh, well, probably a warrant.
Yeah, you're probably right, Cindy.
I think it was a warrant.
But on the Glendale purchase, they certainly covered some of the fees that through without vote. Now, what was it that they could? It might have been the survey, and there was, and maybe the appraisal. It was the appraisal, I think, that came out of. What is the discretionary fund that you're referring to? I'm forgetting the name.
I think she calls it the administrative fund.
Okay, so there were certain payments made from that fund on behalf of the Glendale purchase. And I have that information somewhere, but I can't. I can't. lay my hand
We could just check that. So let's just make a note that on page 10 and 11, we want to double check the reference to CPA funds being used for this purpose. And then if we need to make a change on that, we will do that, you know, if we need to do that. Okay.
My guess
Yeah.
is that Ken wouldn't have put it in if he didn't believe that that was possible from those administrative funds.
Okay. So shall we move on without? Okay.
Sure.
All right. Economic development. Do we want to spend time on that one? This is quite a fair number of things here. Some of this is land use policy, transparent permitting.
Can I ask you a question, Chris? What's the
Yep.
point of going through it all like this now?
Well,
Sorry, but
I mean,
I'm just wondering.
At some point, we need to, we can't do it tonight because we don't have a quorum, but we need to vote to adopt this so we can put it to the select board, I think. If we're in agreement with it, it needs to go to the select board and say, okay, folks, here's the action plan. Select board, now what are you gonna do? So that we've got to then take it, I think, as the charge to say, okay, well, we want to have, you know, an active committee represented by, you know, whomever to really carry out these actions. So yeah, that's what I'm saying is I don't think I was hoping that, you know, as you had read it, maybe there were things that really struck you all that, you know, you were kind of shaking your head at saying, this doesn't make sense to me. Nothing was so crazy that it popped out at me, but maybe because I've seen it too many times.
So we all.
Yeah, well, so yeah, no, and then I don't want to, I don't really want to, you know, belabor it, but I think the point is we need to say that we're happy with this. This is our end product, and we put our stamp of approval on it and pass it on to select board. So we definitely can't make a final decision on that tonight by not having a quorum, but
But it is indeed the end product, isn't it, Chris?
sorry,
It is indeed the end product.
as far as I know, yep.
Yeah. So I mean, there. It's just a formality to vote to accept it, right? Because we don't have any alternative.
Well, no, but if there are edits to be made, we can edit that. I did talk to Ken about that. I said if there is something that is, you know, incorrect or something that if we need to make some edits, are we allowed to do that? And he said yes. He sent me the Word version as well.
Okay.
I would certainly hope so, since you know it's a grant.
Yeah, it's our product.
Yes.
The only thing I can't change is the cover page. He's got that in some other format, but basically the text, if there was something we wanted to delete, change, whatever, we could do that. And then I would let him know, and he would probably re-PDF it. So he would, you know, we could make the changes in Word, I guess, and then just let him know where we had made changes, I guess. But he was not having any proprietary notion of, you know, having to have changes approved by him or anything like that. So
Okay.
yeah. So this chapter, just briefly, if you look at this one, there's a whole lot of narrative behind this one, okay, on the economic development, and I think he gave some good thoughts here. So maybe what we can do tonight, because our hour's getting late here, is just to kind of quickly just run down at the end of each of these chapters and just kind of note what's been written. And then maybe for our next meeting, we just focus on these a little bit more in detail, so that we are able to really say, okay, there's something here that really isn't right, or we want to add to it, or whatever it might be, so that we don't, you know, spend a lot of time belaboring it tonight. Historical, there were lots of things there, and you know, again, a couple of paragraphs of ideas here that may or may not be as much as one would hope, but there were a few things here. that he did try to talk about the Mass Cultural Council, which I wouldn't have necessarily thought about. And I think a lot of this too, I don't think most of this was volunteer time. There wasn't much else. He did put a CPA, oh, he did put a CPA one up in here somewhere. Yeah, right up here. Planning grant, volunteer consultant time, CPA funds. So the points of interest map, which yeah, may or may not need to be redone. This one down here for signage. So that's probably true on the signage for CPC funds. That's been done before. You know, those kinds of things. So, you know, I think he did what he could. He was saying that, you know, he doesn't pretend to know all the resources out there. He did what he could, and tried to give us some guidance here. So here's the open space portion. Odds and ends of different things still ongoing and or short term. A couple things in progress maybe. And then, you know, a few comments here mentioned about the update of the plan, the wetlands bylaw being new, the fact that we've already applied to mass trails on the Greenway. So there's a few points here. And he's done, sorry, back up. I just went too fast again. Up in this part, this is where he did try to do a couple of other things where he was mentioning certain kinds of grants. Up in this little chart on this one, he got a little bit more specific. So I think maybe if each of you at least look at the chapter that is your bailiwick, and then we'll try to do what we can with the rest of them, then where we don't have anybody really represented. I mean, I don't know, mobility per se. We don't have a committee on mobility, as far as I know. And there wasn't much said here. This is really more in conjunction, I think, with yeah, some highway department stuff in particular, because a lot, but I think, is this the one? Yeah, so this is what he was saying. I think a lot of the state DOT money gets channeled through PVPC as a regional planning entity. So that's why PVPC, I think, kind of appears frequently in here, is that we don't oftentimes get that direct money. It comes through a conduit as our regional planning entity, which right now would be the PVPC. So I think that's what he's saying here, is that, you know, continued engagement with the highway department would help us. Not, I think the mobility one, we didn't have a whole lot to say on this anyway, because we weren't talking about public transport. That didn't score very high in our survey, etc. Public services and facilities, he's put in a few things here and there that are very specific. Homeland Security Advisory Council, okay, okay. So that's a very specific activity. So I think what I was liking was the ones that he had tried to get,
It's almost over.
you know, a little bit more information in the community IT grant, working with the schools for hardware and software, municipal light plant. So this is possibly Westfield Gas and Electric. So this is the Whip City folks that came to talk to us. Holyoke Gas and Electric would be another one. And again, just talking about what's available, but this notion about improving our broadband and internet, he did go into a little bit more detail here, talking about one of the things that the town would have to do would be to establish a municipal lighting plant, which is separate from the town governmental departments. And so it's, you know, a first step that would have to be done to establish something on our own if we were going to manage our own utilities, for example, for the broadband and internet.
And I will tell you, just, you know, just recent not a lot, but a couple recent communications with the select board from residents has really focused on the quality of our internet service, and when are we going to move away from charter? What are we going to offer municipal? Well, can't we, you know, hook up with
Yep.
Westfield. I mean, it's out there, and
Yeah.
I think the drum beats are only going to get louder.
Oh, they are. And if you remember when the Whip City folks came in to talk to us, that they gave us like a $5 million price tag, right?
Yes.
So
Yes.
this is the challenge.
Yeah, and that's really what stopped our conversation dead in our tracks. $5 million.
Right. But at the
Well,
same time,
4.3.
yeah, at the same time, they're doing a whole bunch up in the hill towns. So,
Yes.
they're the ones putting it on the hill towns all over the place. But
Mhm.
again, this is where Kim Florick has got some great ideas because she's been connecting some of this with the schools, both Hampshire Regional and Norris. And so she could be a good resource to help
Good. Yeah,
start
you're right.
some of
That
this as
would be
well.
good.
So I think there's ways to keep things moving here. But I do believe, I'd have to go back and check the date, but it seems to me that we have a 10-year contract with Charter. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that goes to, I want to say 2017, 2027, maybe. I think it was signed a year or two before I came on the select board. So I'm thinking,
I think you're right, but it's going to take us 6 or 7 years to get there.
yeah,
But we
it
have
would.
to start now.
Right. Yep. So a lot of this energy one, I think there was some good information on here. We're already a green community, which makes us eligible to perhaps get some other grant funding. There's a variety of things that he's talked about here. PVPC had done a whole bunch of work with 11 communities on best practices for solar development. So there's resources there. There was talk, I think, of something to be helpful with wind, for example, maybe a wind bylaw or something. I think I saw him mention in here somewhere. So, I mean, he's tried to be, as concise as he can be. Certainly a vast improvement, I think, from the first version that we saw. So,
I totally agree, yeah, with that.
and land use, just a little bit more on here. And then this one just went into what the completed strategies are. So according to him, in the head count of the 23 strategies that were identified, 20 had been identified as short-term or ongoing. And so in the past 5, 6, 7 years, whatever, these are ones that have been already achieved. So he did go through and kind of list those chapter by chapter. So we just take a look at that and be sure that we agree that that's really true. We didn't misstate anything. And again, if there's something that has been achieved that we didn't note, we should definitely keep track of that. But that's basically it. So we have essentially, basically a 25-page report, which is what we asked for. Something that's, able to be used, frankly, from the grant committee point of view. We could use this if we needed to apply for a grant. This is an easy attachment. You don't need the appendix. You've just got this, concise, relatively concise report.
Mhm.
So I think it's something, that's user friendly and can be a source for, some sort of action going forward directed by the select board. So,
And it's not an overwhelming document for residents if they want to look at it. It's also a great source to point people who are interested in volunteering on committees. It gives some very specific direction.
Good point. Very good point. Yes.
Yes, really good point.
Yep. So I think that's, I think we've, gotten some good results here. And if everybody agrees, let's sort of kind of call it quits for tonight, but then set another meeting where we go through and I would just ask you guys to look at, the narrative parts that he's put in here. And especially if there's something that you don't think, has been captured well enough, maybe we can go back and ask for more of that. But I think we pretty much have, 95% of the report. So if there's something really missing, we'll have to deal with it. But I think my only thought would be that if there's something in one of these strategy sections that belongs, that we didn't achieve, although he thought we achieved it, or it's something that's in the long term that really is jumping to the short term, whatever. I think I'm unplugging myself. Hold on a minute. Before I lose my power. Oh yeah, my cat knocked me out. Okay, Blame it on the cat. Blame it on the cat. Oh gosh, hold on a minute. Yep, all right. There, okay. Okay. Whew. So anyway, if we find that there's something we want to, change, but I mean, let's just try to go through it and see if we are really in agreement with it. Then we can just sort of say, okay, we put our blessing on it and pass it on to the powers that be to try to put forth a strategy to make it real. Okay.
Great.
Good. Well, thank you, everybody. I appreciate that. Could we quickly try to
Can
say
we do
yes?
Next meeting, can we do it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's where I was going. Could we try to set a time for our next meeting? How soon would you like to try and meet? Today's the 14th. And I'd
just-
rather try to keep it probably, I did it on a Wednesday only because I forgot and I posted the meeting too late. I was trying to do a Tuesday, but I don't know that it makes any difference. I don't know what Brittany's schedule is to know what's better for her. Any particular night that's better for anybody?
Tuesdays are better.
Mm-hmm. So Tuesday alternating with select board could do.
Except
Well,
that we're booked for the 20th and 27th,
Right.
and probably the 4th, because that's back on our regular schedule.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So we might not be until like the 11th.
Yeah.
Or I could do well, we don't want to mess with Wednesdays, maybe.
What about a Monday? Is that bad for people?
I could juggle. The finance committee is the only committee that meets, that I'm aware of, meets on Monday at 5:30. So by 7, it should be okay.
We have Concom every 2 weeks. They just met. 19. I think that, well, the 26th, I think, is open. If we wanted to meet it one more time at the end of this month in a couple weeks.
Yeah, I think if you want to move this along, I would like to, I think if we get together sooner rather than later.
Okay.
And also, given that elections are coming up, let's be fair to candidates that should take the time to read this, especially select board candidates.
Good point. Yeah. Okay, well, let's go for Monday, April 26th at 7 o'clock.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
All right, we will go for that. Thank you very much. So with that, I will take a motion to adjourn the meeting.
I'll make that motion.
All right, could I have a second? Okay. And roll call?
Senior eye.
That's right.
Palmer, yes.
Okay, Fowles eye. All right, unanimously. All right, so let us adjourn. It is 8:39 by my little clock. So thanks very much. I really appreciate the discussion. It's good to be back together again. And let's catch up again in a couple weeks. So thanks a lot, everybody, for all your input.
Thanks, Chris, for your hard work.
Good job.
Really.
All right,
Great
take care.
job.
All right, bye.
Bye,
Bye.
folks.